Where's Chris?
Where's Chris exactly?
Maybe at a toilet break. All right. I'll start a little bit and then we'll come back. And thank you for Anastasis. I mean, I've more been opening the door and there's Chris, so I don't have to fill too much time. So just about the Justice for Palestine series, Anastasis approached me to do this evening. It's open for anyone to approach me to use this evening. I actually don't want to organize on my own because it's a lot of work. So I'd rather open the door with the facilities that I have. And I hope that other people who have a position, either in media or institutions, to open the door and have that courage. I think we're the first and only institution that actually doesn't have a neutral stance kind of series, which is ridiculous. What sometimes help if you're an institution that you can say, hey, you know what, that institution is already doing, why are we not doing it? So maybe help it. I hope we were the first sheep, but not many sheep following yet. So use that leverage, use us as a leverage, or approach me if you're a grassroots, no budget crew. We're happy to spend that money and lose money for this series. So yeah, approach us if you want to do something. Yeah, you can come up. You missed it. We were introduced, and we're gonna do the story together. So, and the poetry.
I drank too much water. Sorry.
It was first the idea was that Chris would do the poetry and I would do the story, but then I was like, I cannot tell this story alone. We should do it together because we went there together with my father and my mother, who are sitting over there. So, and maybe what the story is gonna be about to briefly. Let me put it on. Can I have the where you see the maps on? Maybe I did the navigation thing on. Yeah, not this one. Next one. Next one. Yes, this one. So, our story is going to be about us returning to our village of our forefathers, great grandfather, in Armenia, or occupied Armenia or Turkey. Sometimes we refuse. I mean, I would be someone that doesn't even recognize the United States or Canada. This is occupied Turtle Island. They're guests there, and they should behave like
Invaders,
guests.
not guests.
Yeah, they could have been guests. They've started invading. And there's many similarities. So when there was the story of allyship, when Anastasis told this evening was happening, and we see so many similarities, our story is going to be about a village that is one of the many villages that disappeared in the Armenian Highlands. And as you see in the map, there's many churches and schools that completely disappeared. There are hundreds. And we were killed. More than 1 million Armenians were killed. So, a Palestinian resistance symbol is a key. And in the Armenian case, because they wanted to return home, and in the Armenian case, not many people were able to hold the key even to return to their homes. But for me, it looks like, if you look at the Nakba and all the villages that disappeared in the middle, you can see something similar. So our story is actually not a special story. It's one of the many stories. And I'm sure many of the Palestinians have these stories to tell of their villages disappearing. So that's what our story is going to be about. And maybe Chris, you would like to tell who our great grandfather was.
Right. So I don't even know how to say his name properly. I mean, I do know, but it's just like, is he Simon or is he Harutun? I don't know. Because he was 17 when the First World War started. And basically, his brother, who was, of age, whose name was Simon, was drafted into the military. But he just had a baby. And so Harutun said, you know what? I'll become Simon. I'll become you. I'll go in your place so you can stay there. You can raise a family. You need to be there for your child. I'll go in your place. So he goes to the front. And apparently he was a good soldier. His general liked him. He got some medal, and eventually he gets shot in the foot. He thinks he's gonna return home. But then his general basically tells him, who knows a little bit more because he's higher in the rank, he tells him, you shouldn't go back there. There's nothing for you there. and he gives him a Turkish last name. And my Turkish is not very good. I speak Armenian, but Bedonolu is the Turkish version. Bedoyan is the original version. We even went searching all the way back into the archives actually for the proper name. So my mom still has actually that Turkish name, and he survives under that name in Istanbul. And the last thing he has is this letter from his mother, where they basically tell him that there aren't men coming for them and they don't know where they're taking them, and that if he misses them, that he should look at the sky and look at the clouds and consider those clouds the letters that they sent him. And well, I've never met Simon or Harutun, but my mother told me that he was always, they had this very tight village, tight quarters in Istanbul, and that he would always be sitting on the porch, looking um, at those clouds. So um, basically, that's his story. And then nobody went back there for literally 100 years. My mom apparently wanted to go back. I was the first in our family to have that. I thought I was the first to have that urge to go back, but apparently she had it when she was my age as well. But she was told not to go back there in those times. Still, you could still get killed if, as an Armenian, you wanted to go back to the village. But times have changed. It's a lot later now. There's not many Armenians left, so they feel more threatened by the Kurds than the Armenians now. So we could go back, and I think from there maybe you want to pick up the story.
Yeah. So what we did last summer, we went with the four of us, and I think for everyone it's different. So there's different accounts of the story, but we also didn't know what to expect because it was always discouraged to go back or to ask questions. We have vrijheid van meningsuiting, I guess, here. I mean, you can lose your job, but there's maybe a different level of not speaking out or being afraid of something. Here you have more like, if you speak out, maybe nobody hears you, but maybe there are different consequences. So it was always discouraged to go. And at some point you get multiple generations after. So one can physically not go, the other one is afraid to go, the other one has learned to not ask questions, and then comes the fourth generation, which is us, is like, why the fuck don't we go? So we go. And we take my mother, which I'm happy with because she speaks Turkish, so we could navigate locally. She was raised there. So we go. And I didn't know what to expect. We had some history. We had some vague stories, some old images of the village. And other thing that we knew was that Zeytun was a place where there was a lot of resistance from stories. It means olive oil, or olive. And so starting this journey with an open mind, not sure what it is going to do. We had out of the car. We first went to Istanbul, Belize, and we were driving and thinking, okay, probably the village we're not going to see much anyways because it's all gone. No Armenians living there. So probably we're going to spend half a day. So we should also see other parts of Turkey, right? So we also plan to see other parts of the Armenian Highlands and the history. And just the road to it was already quite bizarre because you could see so much cultural heritage that was there, like old temples built in the mountains. Like the first Christians were actually not colonizers. They were refugees themselves, ironically. Probably Jesus was a rebel, otherwise he wouldn't have been crucified by an empire, right? So the first Christians were actually refugees from the Roman Empire, settling there in the region. And they built beautiful temples there. And then every time you see something like a cultural heritage that is not part of the Turkish heritage, you have like a ticket office in front of them. So nobody's practicing or remaining that heritage culturally, but it's just like a ticket office in front of you and you have to pay to actually see that heritage that is not theirs. So that was also a very strange experience. And you had like markets where they would still sell stolen goods and rings and keys and this kind of thing. People's, when you ask them, do you know what's left of Armenia? Some people are telling people are still looking for gold with metal scanners. So it's like you're going through a land. It's not only about going through your village, but it's if you see it through a different lens. I mean, if you go to the airport, you see beautiful Turkey and all these sites, but you're going through a wasteland. You're looking back at a history that should not have been history. There could have been living people in these areas. And strangely enough, for me, when I was going to the village, I had an image of a flat land because I'm born and raised in the Netherlands. There's no hill, so I thought maybe a small hill, 3 or 4 buildings left, and then maybe some Turkish people there. That's it. That's what I had as an image that maybe there was going to be the day. Um, and so going there, there was this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful lake. It's a beautiful landscape there, blue where the river goes, and you go up the mountains and mountains and mountains up until you reach a village. And you could see that people chose to live on this village. It's on the top of the hills, and there's a river that's cutting through the mountains. So you have to imagine if a river, like for hundreds of years, cuts through mountains. Yeah, you can see it over there. Then it becomes like, if you play a guitar, you have like a hole in the middle, and the strings you play, yeah, it creates extra sound. Otherwise, if you string without the whole thing, then it doesn't produce sound. So you have to imagine, basically, it's like a guitar, and the strings is the river, right? So the whole valley, you could hear this river continuously streaming as if you're in like a meditative temple. And on top of that ridge with a beautiful view, there you can see the view. The village was looking over that valley that would end up in this lake. And it was just astonishing. So at that point, I didn't even care like who the people were. It was just so beautiful to be there, to realize that our ancestors were living there. Um, but yeah, the village was also renamed after Süleymanji. Süleymanji is a Turkish general. They renamed it. Who was then a fallen hero, and there was a blood bridge, and we first thought, oh, is that the bridge where Armenians were killed? No, that was the bridge where Turkish were killed. So now they're martyred. So there's a whole different remembrance. And I remember, because we were taught don't speak or don't ask. Let's just, this is beautiful, let's just go. But then, we had a discussion. Should we talk to the villagers? There was a group of villagers sitting there. And my father was very like, okay, you know what? Let's not get into trouble. I was like, no opinion. And Chris, whoever, he was always a bit more stubborn, or like a left. I just left like a...
Gusto guts.
Yeah, you got guts, let's say. So he said, no. No, this is your village. You should talk to them. And maybe you want to say what we got from that conversation, talking to the villagers there.
I mean, it wasn't only most of the guts were for my mom because she has to do the talking, right? I just
we couldn't communicate.
egged her on a little bit, but I did tell her, just to be clear, I did tell her, trust your own instinct because I trust you. So you decide whether you want, to tell your story. But yeah, I mean, she was also, a little bit bad with her legs, so I went up in the village with her, and and there were actually a few groups, and one group in the end she decides to talk, but I don't really follow, but you can get the energy, and I just at some point in the conversation you felt like she was like telling them something. And I went up with her after that to like the looking out point, which of course is a Turkish flag. Every place, it's funny. It's like, the US has it, Israel has it. I think like every country that colonizes a place wants their flag everywhere because they're like ancients or something. I don't know. But we went up there. We have a look, and well, my mother told me basically that she told her that she was from there, that her great grandfather, her grandfather, my great grandfather, was from there. This is her village. This is her village. And we went back down, and we weren't sure how they were going to respond, but then they asked us to have a coffee, actually. And it was, and we just had it like right on the street, right? And it was very interesting, actually, how that went. There were a few men sitting here, and there were two women like sitting there, and the responses were so gendered. Like, my mom would tell her story, and the first responses of the men would be like, well, the Armenians were bandits, and do you know how they terrorized the Turks, and stuff like that. And the women were actually very interested, and you could see it in the body language, in the voice, they were really shocked, actually, to hear what happened. And we had a kind of a relief also, because what we heard is that actually most of those villagers weren't the people who murdered the Armenians. They were Greeks, or how do we even call it? They were Turkish people deported from Greece, but they lived for generations in Greece. And they did the same with Greek people in Turkey because they wanted to have like an ethnically pure state. And this is also funny. Sometimes people think like the Armenian genocide was like this religious conflict, just like now with Palestine. They think this religious conflict. Is not. It was the young Turks, just like the Zionists, were secular, often even atheists, fanatically nationalist from a European racist idea. Um, and their stories were so it was strange, and of course they weren't all murdered, so they were a bit lucky in that sense. But they had horrifying stories themselves, right? So they told how her mother, for example, had to leave. They had to like in the middle of the night they would be taken from their village. They wouldn't even have time to pack things. They would see, sick people who didn't make it on the road. They would just be tossed out, and they would just be placed in that village, and they would see, here you go, here's your house. And they had no idea. They had no idea. And this is the first, you could really see like the shock in their faces, right? This is the first time they hear about it. um and it's interesting how you see this dynamic also about oppressors and oppressed, right? Like, this is not the first wave actually of refugees who were settled to replace Armenians there. It was a wave upon wave from the Balkan Wars before that, right? And they would actually use these refugees because they were disjointed, not rooted, and it was easier to settle them because we were living high up on the mountains. We would live seasonally, and not just the Armenians, also the more, like, let's say the ancient Turks or the ancient Kurds who were living there for more than 1,000 years. They would go back and forth because in the summer there's malaria on the coast. You don't want to be there, but then the cotton plantations need to be manned. The Great Britain wants to have their big factories running on cotton, and then suddenly it starts being produced en masse, and they want to keep people there in the summer. And you see that settler dynamic starting from there, ending up in the genocide, which of course is, sometimes we forget, but also the United States, Canada were also settled in large part by religious refugees. So that's not the first time. And then I want to give the floor again to you to finish up this story.
Shit, I was so much listening to you. What do I tell? No. What do I tell? I got it and then I lost it again.
I think because you also went to Palestine, actually.
Yeah.
And
maybe what I can say, what I just for the story and how I like the beauty of the place as well, to just remember that was funny, like what I remember, because my mother was translating in between as well. And what one of the villagers said, I mean, it gave a rest of peace that it was, in a way, they were also victims of a ethno-state deporting people. And they thought of moving around because it's now quite a small village. There's like 300 to 400 houses. There used to be more than 3,000 houses. And he said it was like they looked around other houses in the region and this was their favorite place to be. And it's not strange that it's their favorite place to be because besides it being utterly beautiful, it was also a place where there was a lot of resistance. Because they were uphill, they, could fight off more easily than there wasn't fighter jets and these kind of things in this time. So they could easily, fend off other enemies. And maybe I can show you the black and white version of Zeytun. Or that Bart can do that. The one with zwart-wit photos. Yeah, so you can see here, these are images from right before, the village got disappeared. So if you look at the previous image, you still see some of the old house structures, and they're really weird. When we asked them, where did the houses go? They said, yeah, there was a bee plague, and the military tried to solve it, and then suddenly everything got burned down. Like, they have really a lot of fairy tales. But you can see, like, a lot of houses, and everyone was part of the resistance, So these are images of the resistance. It doesn't matter if it was women or priests, turn the other cheek wasn't a thing. And I'm saying this, it's if you have like an enemy that is out there to exterminate you, at some point you have the right to resist in any way. And I know that, and I thought that as well, that Armenians never resisted, that we are like a very peaceful, like, I guess we have also this stereotype of being very successful and, we are just good at getting jobs and this kind of thing. And that we're very peaceful and never armed. But actually what I've learned through this history because we also went in broader history, reading books, listening to podcasts, and there's a few like people that are commemorated or events that are commemorated in Armenian history that were crucial for our preservance. With Mardeka, also the Indonesians had to fight for their right to exist. Actually, the Armenians have over the centuries every time because they're on the Silk Road. This is like the shit street of violence, right? This is like the place where you even have the Babylonian Empire, this empire. It doesn't matter. They every time had to fight for their right to exist. And the oldest story that we have is from Haik. It's 3,000 years ago. And he didn't want to live in the Babylonian Empire. And he was a very good and respected general there, but he didn't want to live under tyranny. So he decided to bring his people to the mountain of Ararat. This is the body language of finishing up. I will finish up. So the army wanted to annex and wasn't agreeing that he fled. So he shot an arrow from very far, is the legend, and he shot the other general, and then he died. And then they got so scared of it that they fled. And then maybe on one other battle that was very important was actually when the genocide was happening. Everyone was mobilized at some point where the border is now of Armenia. Right at that border, they have this monument. It's the Battle of Sardarabat. And actually, everyone was mobilized to fight off the Turks that was commencing with the genocide. So, the children had to dig like the loopgraven and the women bringing food and whatnot. So it's like everyone was mobilizing, including the churches, to defend that. And they lost a few battles, the Turks there, and then they stopped at that border. So that is the point where the genocide stopped. Otherwise, like the Kurds, we wouldn't have a country, we would have been complete diaspora. So, but yeah, next to this, and I'm not going to explain who they are because of time, but culture and existence is resistance is the other part because you fight for something. And we also have statues for a lot of people who have been documenting the history, these stories that we can tell historians from a few hundred years ago, that have preserved our identity. And that is why we even have a language, the music. We're going to play the duk. It's made in Armenia. If you want to order it, if you want to teach it, learn it. This instrument, you have to go there. So, some of the music that you're going to hear is there because also some people fought with their lives for it. I'm going to, keep it there for the time. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe before this is really.
Sorry, Bart.
Tell that to Bart.
Okay, I'm gonna do a poem, and there's one more thing I want you to know when you hear the poem is what I try to do, because the whole point of us telling this story is that there's so many obvious connection with the story in Palestine, and not just Palestine, in Turtle Island, in so many places that have been colonized, we see so many similar patterns, and that's why. For both of us, actually, we always organized for every community. Like my mother used to complain, actually, when are you gonna do something for the Armenians, And but for us, these are all so interconnected. It's not just one struggle. It's very important to realize that we might be a minority when we're alone, but together we are the majority. We can beat them, and we actually started an organization that the whole aim is to decolonize and to unite all the different groups. And we chose this name Arales, which is the oldest god in the Armenian pantheon that we know of, or like God wasn't really a word then, it was more like a spirit animal. And it's not like it's an Armenian organization, we're the only Armenians there, but it was such a beautiful symbol. It's a winged dog that lives in Ararat or lives in the heavens, it depends who you ask, and they descend to lick the wounds of fallen warriors to bring them back to life. And for us, that symbolizes what we need, that combination of healing, those stories that we tell each other, that we hold each other now to keep each other strong, but also to fight. Not some kumbaya bullshit, like we actually need to defend ourselves. So you'll see some of those symbolisms coming back, and you'll hear that with the beautiful Deduk that sometimes takes a long time to start off, or no, you're ready. Okay.
It's going to be fine.
Then that was the final word, and I give the floor to Max. mountains, the wailing of the Deduk, the sound of my people. Oh, Ararat, how have you become a wasteland surrendered by fences and soldiers, weapons of war? Stories like Potosi, so many sacred spirits murdered for silver and gold. Portasar, the ancient ruins, we know our ancestors were there for thousands of years. Like the Zeytun of my great-grandparents, crossing Syrian deserts to be exiled again by the Nakba, the perpetual diaspora. And still, there remain deserts to cross, from the Sahara to the Mediterranean, where weapons of war await for those who would suffer the same fate. At the hands of petty men, insignificant, who look at the stars and see no wonders or mystery, but only wonder about colonizing the planets, the stars, and the distance afar. Cecil Road, Talat Pasha, Imperial Dream. The soil remembers as the olive trees do, who gave them water or poisoned them with the blood of their kin. As their mighty wings spread, the winged dogs at Alesses descend to lick our wounds, resurrecting warrior. From deep into the earth, rooted and strong, a flower blooms in your center, telling you to fight, singing the songs of old. The voice speaking to us of the world to come, trying to be born. It is an echo of the many roads lost, trying, grasping, demanding to be reborn. From the ashes like a phoenix, the thousands upon thousands of bodies carrying ancient knowledge, sacred healers tortured and burned on the stakes of the Inquisition and the capitalist courts. Like leaders crucified or hanged like Tula and Tupac Amaru, their spirits are calling for justice. Capitalist class who swallowed the world for petty greed and nightmares of power. The dead do haunt you. The dead do haunt you as we, movement of movements, stand on the shoulders of our ancestors, whether spiritual or political, peasants and workers breathing down your neck. Demanding from you, class trees, to abandon your riches and your power, to receive in return, like mighty rivers flowing, your own place on this earth. Says, winged dogs of resurrection descending from the heavens, so that Ararat lives on in the spirit of resistance of our founder Haik.
our bows and gaze at the heavens, our arrows piercing through the night sky, rushing for the heart of the tyrant. Look up at the stars, like Portasar, knowing that the breath of the universe waits calm